Hello everyone, and welcome back to Possessed Radio. And as always, I'm your host Steven, and today's show is devoted entirely to all of those who have supported me these last few months. Your support is appreciated, so to celebrate 200 subs, we're switching things up with some true stories. Please support the original authors for providing such awesome stories with their links below. And for those of you who are just stopping in for the first time, I hope you enjoy, and if you'd like to help one of the little guys, please like and subscribe. But for now, take care, thanks for listening, and as always, keep the lights off. Sorry ahead of time for any format issues. I'm posting this from my cell phone. So for context, I'm a 22-year-old male, and I live in a large city in the Midwest. Now, I drive for Lyft while putting myself through trade school. I drive for other similar companies, but that's besides the point. I have many horror stories from those as well, but I'll tell those another time. It was Christmas Eve, 2020. I was out running Lyft for a few hours before heading to my mom's with my new baby and wife. Nothing special going on for the night, just the usual. I get a ride request. It was a pickup from this kind of lower income apartment complex. No big deal. I arrive and I find my passenger. He has all his belongings. Several boxes of stuff. Now my car is a 2006 Chevy Impala, so it's not too big. We get all of his stuff loaded up, barely, and are on our way. During the ride, he's crying, saying his girlfriend was cheating on him, and he had walked in on them earlier that night. He couldn't stay there because it was her name on the lease. So I was taking him to a hotel. Now, in my city, we have a street that is well known for having vices. Hookers, drugs, gangs, weapons, and shady motels. The works. We get to the motel and he asked me to wait for him to check in and get his key. No problem, man, I say. I'll confess, I break the rules a little when it comes to Lyft. I have a gun hidden in a concealed holster secured to the underside of my driver's seat for protection. Reason being, driving Lyft and other contract apps, I've had knives and guns pulled on me. As well as people have tried to fight me, rob me, and all kinds of other things. But, like I said, another time. This motel was on the street I mentioned before. Homeless people were everywhere. There was a dude on the far corner of the complex that still had a needle in his arm, passed out against the building. And I'm a big fan of true crime and horror narration, so I'm on edge. He gets his key. The whole motel is ground level, so to help the guy out, I drive to his door. As I mentioned before, he had a lot of stuff. So I started to help him unload this stuff. While on my second trip getting stuff, I saw a guy come out of a room just south to my car, followed by two ladies. They came up to the room I was next to, not my passenger. One of the ladies pounded on the door and then opened it. That's when I saw the guy raise a fucking shotgun up out of his long coat and storm into the room. The two ladies followed him, slamming the door behind them. Following, I heard a lot of yelling and shouting. I was just waiting for shots to ring out. Out of nowhere, my passenger came up behind me. I can take this, man. Go ahead and take off. Have a Merry Christmas. And he gave me a cash tip. I didn't even notice he took the boxes out of my hands or slid a $5 bill in my pocket. I was frozen. I knew what may have been going down in that room. I had to leave or at least get to where I could get my gun. I know the guy and both ladies saw me. And I know they knew I saw the gun. I had to get out of there. No witnesses. I got in my car and sped away quickly. I got a block or so away and called the cops. I gave them every detail. After I got off the phone with the police, I signed out a Lyft. I hadn't made much money, but I was done. I got a call later that night. The cops investigated. They never found the gunman or the women. They never answered the door I saw them come out of. And the occupants of the room they went into said nothing happened, and that I was full of shit. Well, I know what I saw. So, to the gunman I saw with the shotgun, who I'm sure was making a statement to someone about a debt, let's not meet again. This happened a long time ago. I'm guessing back in 2006, and I can't have been any older than 4 years old at the time. Yet I vividly remember the fear I felt during this encounter. It was an early summer morning, and the sun was up, but few people were out. In fact, the streets were practically dead that morning. My mom decided to take my sister, only 1 year old, seated in a stroller, and I to throw away some garbage at the garbage station. I might add that the garbage station is kind of secluded from nearby houses, bordering one of those deep, dark forests of East Sweden. Since I was only 4 years old when this happened, the memories from the incident have faded a lot. However, my mom remembers all of it. She says that upon entering the garbage station, she immediately got an eerie feeling of being watched. I remember that feeling too. I felt creeped out, even though I didn't know why I was scared. I guess I could sense my mom's fear. Walking along that secluded garbage station, my mom suddenly stopped and told me this. My name, hold onto the stroller as hard as you can and don't let go, no matter what. That's my most vivid memory I have of this, and I don't think I'll ever forget those words. I'll at least never forget how they made me feel. It was as if my blood turned to ice. I just froze. My mom sounded stern, but even a toddler can sense when someone's scared shitless. My mom was definitely afraid of something. The rest is just a blur. I don't remember much, apart from the aforementioned. So I'll let the rest of the story be told from the perspective of my mother. This is the recollection of her experience, recalled to the best of my abilities, but in my own words. Not far from where we were standing, a truck was parked, with a man seated in the front. Nothing unusual. A lot of truck drivers stopped to rest by the side of the road. But this man was staring. He wouldn't stop staring. He stared right at me, examining my body, with the determined gaze of a predator. Gluing the three of us in his sight, he truly seemed pleased by the fear he'd instill in our faces. And his eyes, they were something else, almost as if they didn't belong to a human, but rather to a predator on the savannah. I felt like prey, stuck in the claws of a lion. I just couldn't move. That's when he smiled at me. I remember that dead smile, those cold, calculating eyes, and the way he licked his lips, almost as if to say, I could kill you if I wanted to. I believe this was the point in time, into this strange encounter, when my mom told me to hold onto the stroller, to hold on tightly, and to not let go. My mom is a small woman, 160 centimeters, weighing only about 45 kilograms, or about 5 foot, 100 pounds, and she could easily have been overpowered by the overweight man in the truck. My mom later admitted she was afraid he'd jump out of the truck and knock her out, possibly assaulting her or even kidnapping me and my 1-year-old sister. We bolted out of there. We didn't throw away much garbage that morning. We just turned around and walked home as fast as Mom could do with a stroller and a 4-year-old toddler by her side. We've never talked about what happened that day, up until very recently. The incident has always lingered somewhere in the back of my mind as that weird thing that happened when I was a child, and every time I walk past that garbage station, I get a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. As previously mentioned, this happened around 2006. Fast forward to 2008. The face of a 10-year-old little girl called Angla was printed across the front page of every newspaper in sight. She had been abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered. And the perpetrator was an overweight truck driver named Anders Eklund, now known as one of Sweden's most infamous killers. Anders Eklund was charged with the murder of Angla, alongside the rape and murder of a woman named Pernilla. He's also suspected of abducting another little girl, who's still missing, making him a pedophile, a serial rapist, and a serial killer. My mom says that when she saw Eklund's picture in the paper, especially when she saw those cold, familiar eyes, she knew that he was the creepy man from the garbage station that early morning all those years ago. Thinking of how my mom, or my sister, or me, or all of us could have been victims, that sends chills up my spine. Anders, even though you're behind bars, let's not ever meet again. My mother had left a bad marriage, and our lives were at most times decent. It did take her a bit long to meet a new man, in his 30s with gray, blonde short hair, and an immense muscular build. Tall as a tower, with small black piercing eyes. He had a very charismatic personality that could win over even the most cold-hearted of people. He seemed to like my mom, though, and she seemed happy with him. I had no right to complain because because even little kid me liked him. But it started to become strange when my mother decided to uproot our life to move to this guy's small house in a small village a few miles away. And it would pass 2 years when odd things started to happen. My mom was going to have a party for her birthday and invite some friends plus my brothers. It was nothing remarkable, good food and people making small talk. But my mom was getting so much attention, and that clearly made him annoyed. I don't remember what my mom said, if she even said anything. But we all of a sudden heard a sickening crunch, and I saw my mom in a puddle of blood. Her still talking more, gurgling, and saying, "I am so sorry," over and over again. What happened? Well, he had hit her with a stone ashtray right over her jaw, knocking out teeth and breaking it. His eyes looked so crazy, so dark and empty. I remember tossing myself on my mom and begging him to leave her alone. Him grabbing me and tossing me into my room and locking the door. Fighting ensued, and he ended up leaving the house driving away in his car. My mom, even after this event, refused to leave him. It was her fault, she said. Many horrible things happened during the last years we lived there, but I guess the last straw came from when he almost killed my dog for liking me more than him. My mom somehow woke up from the dark sleep that trapped her for the past years and ran with me to a bus stop during the night when the monster slept. We only had a suitcase with our things. I left everything behind and would get it back in small pieces in a plastic bag. He would call us over and over again, try to find us, but we thankfully found a safe place. And suddenly he stopped calling, and we never knew why. It would pass 3 years back in our old hometown, me walking home from school listening to my Walkman and watching the trees in bloom. Out of nowhere, suddenly a car stopped in front of me, and a hand reached out and yanked me into the car. It was him, smiling widely and saying nothing. He locked the car, and I felt my eyes started to well with tears. "Do not cry, okay?" he said while raising the volume of his music, driving quickly out of town, down dirt roads with trees, speeding by like green and gray blur. I woke up from my fear and saw the house again. He stopped the car, dragged me up the stairs, and me knowing that this might be my last day alive, I begged. He did nothing to listen. I heard the music on his CD player and almost shouted, "I've never heard this song before. It's great." He stopped, looked at me, and smiled. A real smile, but still with no emotion in his eyes. "Right? They're Italian and one of the best bands I've ever heard." My mouth could not stop talking. I would praise his looks and his music, doing anything to befriend him. To survive, it felt like. It took almost an hour before my cell phone started calling. Him, looking irritated, answered it for me. "Hello, OP's brother. How are you?" I heard angry mumbling from my phone and him nodding. They went on for an hour before he started to get his shovel and placing it in the hallway. My mom called. He quickly answered and smiled. I don't know what she said, but it worked. He somehow decided to return me outside of our town. I was shaking and walking like in slumber all the way home. My mom was angry. She never believed that I did not go of my own free will. The dreams of the event would not go away, and we were lucky. Sadly, some animals and people were not. He now sits in prison and can't travel to my location. I live miles and miles away from him. But I still wonder what his intention was for me. Oh well. So, to my mother's crazy boyfriend, let's not ever meet again. I live in Finland in a fairly small city, and this happened to me years ago when I was 14. So it was Friday evening, and on every Friday, our mom let us go to the store and buy candy. So me and my 12-year-old sister left our house to go to the store, and it was already dark outside. We made our way to the closest store, which was over a mile away. While walking at some point, there's a man behind us walking the same way. But I didn't think much about it at the time. He could just be going to the same store. So I continued chatting with my sister while the man is behind us, following at a safe distance. We get to the store with no complications, and the man followed us in. We take our time selecting our candy and get to the register to pay. While I was packing the candy to my backpack, I saw this man buying only a chocolate bar. Pretty far away to go for a chocolate bar, I thought. And at this point, my suspicions start to rise for this guy. I get out of the store with my sister, and we start making our way back. We walked for a while, and I quickly glanced at my back. The man was still there following us. I took a look at my sister, who seemed totally unaware about the man's presence. We continued our walk, and up ahead of us, there was an unlit dirt road, and continued for a good part of the trip. So I look at my back again, and there the man was, about 60 feet away. At this point, I was almost certain that he was following us, because on our way to the store, he did not walk this part of the way behind us. The dirt road goes through a forest, and it had a curve at the start of it. Once we get to the curve, I look back and notice that the man can't see us, so I pull my sister to the woods, and we duck down. My sister is saying something, and I just whisper, "Stay quiet," to her as I wait for the man to come. I could see the man's shadow coming down the road, and he started looking for us from the road. He walked back and forth. Now I was certain he was following us all that time. My heart was racing, and I tried to be as quiet as possible. The man didn't find us, but continued running forwards. We stayed in the forest for a while before getting the courage to come out. We walked the rest of the way home with no problems and get to our house. We eat our candy and have a good evening, but that really did bother me for a while, and especially my sister. Thinking about this still gives me the chills, and the thought of getting caught in that situation creeps me out, and I try not to think about it. I wouldn't want to meet this guy again. When I was 41, I was a volunteer working with the deaf, blind, and visually impaired. While there, I met my then best friend Courtney and her boyfriend Lawrence. The three of us became fast friends and enjoyed each other's company. Little did I know, Lawrence was not the person I thought he was. On February 18th, 2013, my friend Courtney asked me if I would go over and help Lawrence clean his apartment to get it ready for inspection because she wouldn't be able to make it due to a family reunion. So I said I would. That evening, Lawrence said that he had to use the restroom. When he didn't return, I got up to check on him and noticed that he had fallen asleep. I returned to the living room and sat down at the table to wait for my ride to pick me up. Sometime later, Lawrence came walking out of the bedroom, so I shouted, "Hey, Lawrence," and reached out for the chair to make sure he didn't bump into it. I grabbed hold of the chair and still he bumped into it. I heard a noise coming from him. I didn't make sense of what was going on until I looked up and saw his hand coming down. It was then that I realized that he was stabbing me. Once I realized what was going on, I jerked backward, screaming, "Oh my fucking God, what are you doing? You stabbed me in the head!" With blood pouring down my face, I ran to find something to stop the bleeding, screaming, "Oh my God, I'm going to die!" With Lawrence telling me, "You're not gonna die." Grabbing my phone, I dialed 911. The operator asked me, "What's your emergency?" I told her I'd been stabbed in the head by someone who I thought was a friend, and that I didn't want to die. Getting to the hospital, they assessed my injuries, and told me I had been stabbed in the head twice. It took 9 needles to numb my head, and 11 staples to close the wounds. As I lay on the hospital bed, I was told by the police and paramedics that it was a near-fatal stabbing. That day, something died inside of me. The person I was before was gone. I knew then that who I was as a person had changed, and my life would never be the same again. This happened when I was about 10 or so, many years ago, and after reading all the posts here for a while, I figured this one would fit right in. For background, I grew up on a rural, 18-acre farm out in the middle of nowhere with my little sister and my mother. Occasionally at nights, my father would show up. Long story, but oftentimes it was just the three of us. Our property was shaped like a big rectangle, with our house on the very edge of the property with a dirt and limestone road in front of it, and the rest of our property extending back behind us. We had some unfriendly neighbors across the dirt road from us, and after that, there were some mobile homes a few miles away on the right and left. My room was in the back of the house with a large window, looking out at our fenced backyard the sheep were in. And then after that, another fence with a pasture for the goats, and onwards to another pasture, with a fence for our ponies. This is relevant because in order for anything to be in our backyard, you'd have to get past at least one fence. One night I was playing with my action figures on my floor around bedtime when I heard a weird knocking noise coming from my window. And I always had the blinds shut at night because I was scared with the dark. I immediately panicked and ran into my mom's bedroom in front of the house and hysterically told her what had happened. She came over to my window and popped the blinds and looked around, but there was no one except for some sheep in the distance. Since we lived in a pretty woody area, my mother assured me that it was just an armadillo knocking against the wood of our house. This satisfied me at the moment, and I went to bed shortly after. A few weeks went by, and occasionally I'd hear knocking on my window, which would freak me out a little, but since I was assured it was an armadillo, I would just go back to sleep. A few more weeks went by, and I hadn't heard anything for a while, until one night, very, very late. I was awoken by a very loud knocking from what sounded like glass on my window. This was weirder than normal, but still wasn't overly scary to me. Still, I decided this particular knock needed investigation, since it sounded so much louder than the others. I hopped out of the bed and creeped up to the window, and popped the bottom blind up to see if I could finally spot the armadillo. What I saw still gives me the shivers to this day. What I saw was a pair of bare human feet, with dirty blue jeans, and their waist up obscured by the rest of the blinds. Then, to my mounting horror, legs shifted, and the torso leaned down as the person standing behind my window was attempting to look in through the slot in the blinds I had made. I screamed as loud as I ever have, and ran shrieking past my sister's room, through the living room, the kitchen, and into my mother's bedroom. This sent all the dogs scrambling through the house, barking, and woke my sister, who also ran crying to my mom's room. Luckily, my mom was up doing her work on her laptop, and through my sobs I explained what happened. To my mother's credit, she took me seriously, and locked us all in the bathroom and called 911. We stood, crouched in the bathtub with her for what seemed like hours, as the cops tried to find where our house was down the twisting country roads. They eventually showed up, looked around the property, and found human footprints in the sand outside my window, but nothing else. We ended up leaving for a while to stay at my grandma's house in town, but eventually we went back home after a week. My mother ended up buying an axe, but that was all the protection we had since she was a major hippie and didn't believe in owning firearms. There was a few more incidents with knocking, but each time my mom would check and there was never a person there again. Thank God. To this day, I always shut the blinds at night, and I never look past the blinds when it's dark. To preface this, I love to drive. Like hours-long drives to nowhere, with no destination in mind. Just me, my music, and the road ahead of me. Living in Nebraska, I'd often take back roads or lonely highways, cutting through the countryside to small towns and eventually cities, and I'd usually take these drives at night, since there was less traffic to worry about. I've done it since I've had my license 4 or 5 years ago, and I've never once had any sort of issue, nor have I ever run into any trouble. That was until a few nights ago. For reference, I'm a relatively small 22-year-old female, and as I've stated before, I often take these drives completely and utterly alone. They're a good way to clear my head when I'm stressed, upset, or overwhelmed, or for me to get a plan together to sort out personal issues. I've also done these long and lonely drives to get away from the toxicity of my household when I used to live with my parents as a means of coping with their alcoholism. Though now that I've moved out and am in a much better place mentally, I don't really have the urge to get in my car and just drive anymore. However, on the night this event took place, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious, with a clusterfuck of personal issues I'd rather not get into. I felt restless and irritable around my boyfriend, couldn't focus on anything else, and decided I would take a drive to clear my head. My boyfriend was understanding and told me to be careful and to not be gone too terribly long, since it was getting pretty late. I agreed, gave him a kiss goodbye, and left. I drove around our city for about 30 minutes. I was still feeling on edge about everything transpiring in my personal life, so I decided to drive further north down those familiar, dark winding one-lane highways. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles per hour, taking the turns at a slower pace in case a deer jumped out around the bend, and was just admiring the vast empty darkness of the snow-capped fields and barren trees. It was honestly a bit creepy, being all alone with no cars in sight, in seemingly the middle of nowhere. The few houses, miles back from the road, lightless, and the dead cornfields withered away and covered in snow. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I half expected to see a ghost pop up in my rearview mirror or see someone clamber out of the patches of trees dotting the horizon. The only light came from my headlights, and even then I still strained to see through the inky darkness of the night. By now it was just after 11, and I told myself that once I made the familiar roundabout, that would either take you to a small town or back up towards my city, I would head back to the city and home. The roundabout was still 15 to 25 minutes away, but other than my imagination picturing the worst, I wasn't really all that concerned. I mean, I was by myself. I didn't have any other motorists to worry about, right? Wrong. As I'm rounding another bend, I notice a vehicle with its hazards flashing maybe a quarter of a mile or something away from me. It was some sort of sedan, dark colored, and was angled to where only part of it was on the shoulder while the rest was jutted out into the road, like they had to pull over in a hurry, but didn't quite manage to do that. The driver's side door was flung wide open, and as I slowed my vehicle down and angled it towards the opposite side of the road to pass, I could make out what looked like maybe blood in the inside of the open door. I didn't see anyone on the road or in the car, and I was the only motorist in sight. Cell phone reception is spotty at best in this part of the country, but more often than not, you couldn't get reception no matter how hard you prayed, which was definitely the case when I took a glance at my phone to see if I had any service. So, a lone female on the road, at night, pulling up a near vacant vehicle that looks like someone had been attacked on the inside, with no cell service. Now, I'm no dummy. I've watched countless episodes of Investigation Discovery and Criminal Minds, and read far too many true crime books to know that this had bad and danger written all over it. But there was still a small part of me that worried something terrible had happened to whoever was in that vehicle, and I thought I needed to help. These roads don't get a lot of traffic late at night, and temperatures were well below freezing. If someone were hurt or in trouble, there was no one, and nothing else to help them but me. Still, I erred on the side of caution. I was still driving my car, though a bit more slowly, and as I approached the vehicle, I rolled down my passenger window a bit, shut off the music, and called out, "Hey, anyone there? Are you okay?" I didn't hear a response. I worried they were passed out somewhere, but I wasn't able to get out and look for them. I told myself I'd call out one last time, and if I didn't hear anything, I would leave, and the moment there was reception, I'd call it in. And if I did hear someone, well, I'd figure out my next course of action then. So again, I shout, "Hey, what happened? Are you okay?" There was still silence for a beat, and then I heard rustling in the shadow of the trees, followed by a gruff voice saying, "Yeah." I was relieved at first and was about to say something in response or possibly even stop my car and get out, when I noticed three things nearly simultaneously. As I inched my way past the front of the sedan, I noticed there was no damage in the hood or anywhere else in the vehicle, which I found to be strange considering the blood in the inside of the door. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of something coming out from behind the sedan, and they were making their way towards my car fast. The person did not have any blood on them, or appear injured in any way, wearing a mask, not like a face mask for COVID, or a ski mask or anything normal, but one of those masks you would see in the Purge movies, and they were holding something in their hand. I don't know what it was, I couldn't get a good look, but from its length and shape, my guess was maybe a tire iron or a crowbar or something. I don't need to tell you that I slammed on the gas at that moment. I noticed those things and drove like a bat straight out of hell, my heart thundering in my chest and my entire body shaking. My window was still rolled down in my haste, and the music was still shut off, so I could very clearly hear someone, definitely a man, shouting at me, though I had no clue what they were saying. I just knew I had to get out of there immediately. I stole one last look in my rearview mirror as I drove away, mostly to see if they were getting in their sedan to follow, or if they had stopped. The man with the weapon was still standing in the middle of the road watching me, and right before I looked away from the mirror, I saw a second man emerge from the trees that had been rustling earlier, also wearing one of those creepy masks, and no trace of blood on him. I probably broke every law for speeding that night, but I wanted to get as far away from those men as possible. As soon as I made it to the roundabout, I turned towards town, parked in the Walmart parking lot that thankfully still had cars from who I assume were workers closing up shop, and proceeded to have a full-on meltdown. When I could pull myself together, I called one of my friends, T, who was a police officer, to tell him what had happened, and asked what I should do. He was concerned for me, and after asking if I was okay, where I was, did they follow me, etc., he told me since it was out of city limits, he couldn't do much on his end, but he could get in contact with the local police, sheriff in that jurisdiction to make my statement and check it out. I agreed, thanked him, and while I waited for police to show up, I called my boyfriend. Through my hysterical sobs and panic, I managed to tell him what happened, not even 10 minutes or so ago. He was, as you can imagine, super freaked out for my safety, and wanted me to either come home immediately or drive down himself to take me home. I told him the police were on the way to take my statement, so I couldn't leave, and that I was okay, but I stayed on the phone with him until I saw the familiar police cruisers pulling into the lot. I gave the police my statement, and they assured me they would go back to the spot I told them the sedan had been to take a look, and they would try to catch the guys who did it. Though with no cameras and no description of the men, I wasn't sure they'd be able to. I didn't even get the license plate number, though at the time of my panic, the thought never came to mind till the police were asking if I got it. All they had to go off of was a dark-colored sedan and two guys with masks. After I gave my statement, I went home and stayed curled up close to my boyfriend the whole night, listening to every sound the house made in fear it would be those guys arriving any minute to finish whatever it is they had started. Since the incident, I haven't heard back from the police about whether or not they have any leads, and I'm not sure they ever will. I'm just thankful I'm still here, and that I didn't stop my car or get out. I'm not sure what would have become of me if I had. I still have so many questions that have no answers. What were they doing? Why? What was the blood on the inside of the car? Or was it just a ruse to get more attention? If it was really blood, did they hurt someone else? What would have happened to me if I had stopped my car? Needless to say, I won't be going on any more late-night drives to anywhere, and I hope I never cross paths with those freaks again. Cautionary tale about giving strangers rides ahead. About 10 years ago, I was on my way to work, and made my usual stop at the Speedway to grab a Red Bull. I made this stop about every day, so it was routine for me. On this day, however, I was already about 15 minutes late for work, but whipped into the gas station anyway. As I got out, there was a clearly strung-out girl, pacing by the entrance with a baby stroller. I assumed this lady was going to approach me when I got out of the car and ask me for money to buy food. Midwest is filled with dopeheads, so I braced myself for the awkward encounter and headed in. What happened instead is the lady bolted in front of me with her flip phone and stroller in hand, and started begging me for a ride up the road. I declined initially, but she would not fuck off. I get past her, buy my Red Bull, and head to the car. As I get to my car, she reappears from behind my car and starts begging again. This time she flashes a photo of her baby on her phone, and she tells me that she needs dropped off up the road. Fuck it, I'm already late to work. She hops in the back seat with her now clearly empty stroller, and instructs me to drive towards the bypass, close to my work. As we drive, she keeps telling me to just go straight, every time I ask how much further it is. We're now well away from the city, and it's all country roads. I lose my patience and very firmly tell her she needs to either give me an address or get out of my car. She throws $3 in my passenger seat and begs me to just turn into this random gravel road. I turn down it and notice the only thing on the road is a beat up Corsica blocking half the gravel path. I instantly pull off to the side and tell her to get the fuck out now. She begs to just take her down to the Corsica because it's her boyfriend and he has her kid. I tell her if that's true, then he can drive down the road and pick her up. She texted on her phone for a second and without another word just hops out. I'm officially sketched out and flip a bitch just to see in the rear view the Corsica hauling ass behind me. The lady is gone and turning onto the bypass opposite of me. Ended up calling in since I was running about 30 minutes late after everything. My grammar's trash, but I'm 100% certain I was about to be robbed by a crackhead or worse. Between the fake baby photo, empty stroller, and shady dirt road Corsica, I was pretty shook for a good week. This encounter happened about 5 years ago during my junior year of college. My first 2 years of college, I played football for a small liberal arts school. However, I decided to quit the team my junior year. I was still very close friends with many of the guys on the team, so I still lived with a few of my former teammates. As the only non-student athlete in the house, I would always have about 3 hours alone while they were all off at practice. Most days of the week I had class late in the day, and I would come home to an empty house. One day after class, I was walking down to the end of the main street on campus where my house was. I noticed a man standing in the middle of the street, all alone, holding something above his head. As I got closer, I realized the man was acting very strange. The sign he was holding up was just a torn piece of cardboard with some scribbles on it. He was holding it high above his head with both arms and seemed to be looking at something up the street, despite there being nothing. He was yelling unintelligible things, such as, "You think we don't know what you know?" and "We're gonna keep coming back." I initially felt a bit sorry for the guy because he obviously was homeless and suffering some sort of mental breakdown. But what happened next made him harder to sympathize with. I was about 40 yards from my door when he noticed me and turned in my direction. He got right up next to me, shoved the sign in my face while screaming incoherently. I worried he was going to get more physical, so I decided to book it to my front door. Thankfully, I made it and got inside unscathed. I began to chill out in my room and try to just laugh the whole thing off. As I said before, all my housemates were at football practice, so I know not to expect anyone home for a few hours. I'm chilling at my desk when I hear the side door open and close. I immediately go into fight or flight mode and decide to barricade myself in my room, pushing the heavy desk in front of my door. I then yelled, "Get the fuck out of my house!" and called campus security since they could likely arrive before the actual police. I sat there for about 10 minutes, clutching a golf club, until I got a call from security that they didn't see anyone outside. I told them to come in through the side door, which confirmed my suspicion that it was unlocked. We did a quick walkthrough and found nothing. My guess is the crazy guy opened the door, decided not to come in, then closed it, and took off. The world is a very scary place, and by scary, I mean you can't trust anyone. Now, there isn't much to this story, which is okay because I don't think I could actually tell it if there were. This isn't something that I would normally talk about, but I feel like it's time to share what happened. It was my first semester of college, my first time really being on my own, and man, did I think I was ready for it. I made the hour-and-a-half drive from my town to the one where my college campus was in. The first day wasn't all that bad. I mean, I had to go to the building where the workout equipment was to get registered, take my photo for the college ID, and get directions to the building that my dorm was in. The campus wasn't really big. The RA gave me a general description of where everything was. My brother and my brother-in-law at the time were helping me move all of my things into the building where my dorm room was, which was awesome of them to do. I met the girls that I would be sharing the dorm with. They were pretty nice, but the building next to mine had all of the male athletes in it. The first thing I did after officially getting moved into my dorm room I went outside and lit up a cigarette, not knowing that, oh, hey, you can't smoke on campus. It took me the entire night to figure out why the upperclassmen were staring at me weirdly, yet none of them had the decency to fucking tell me. Now, I spent the entire night outside of the concrete sidewalk, getting to know the girls that I was sharing the dorm room with. They were actually really nice and didn't live too far from where my hometown was, so that was awesome. The guys in the dorm room next to ours were nice, but one of them was odd. He seemed really nice at first. He introduced himself, sat with me during orientation, told me where to go if I wanted to smoke a cigarette, which was cool at first because it really helped me out, having him already been there for a year. It was pretty cool that we became friends real quickly, but I hadn't realized that his friendship was more to him than what I thought it was. It started out with small things. He would find me after my classes and walk me to the cafeteria for lunch, or to the dorm so I didn't have to be bombarded by people. The guy was a football player. Tall, broad shoulders, muscles for days, the stereotypical type. Anyway, he actually started to get a little clingy. He wouldn't want to go back to his dorm. He wanted to sleep on the small futon in my room. He wanted to walk me to and from class, have lunch and dinner with me, smoke a cigarette any time he would notice me outside. I didn't really mind having someone to walk to classes with, or to have someone to talk to when I was feeling a bit stressed about classes, so I didn't think much of it. It was about a month and a half into the semester that he really started to get attached. This guy literally started to make any excuse possible so he could get out of going to football practice. He'd tap on my bedroom window when I wouldn't answer his text back, or when I was trying to sleep. I wasn't able to get my studying done because he would bother the ever-loving shit out of me. Like, this guy really went to great lengths just to have my attention. And let me tell you, it got real annoying, real fast. I finally had enough of the sleepless nights. The total feeling of being utterly exhausted all the time and the persistent nagging which was honestly causing me stress. So I told him that it was best if we were to not be around each other for a while. You know, take some time to make different friends. He seemed to take it pretty well. At least that's what I thought. I hadn't realized that he was following me everywhere that I went around campus. Hadn't realized he had followed me all the way back home one time and found out where I lived. I hadn't realized how much my presence meant to this guy until his roommate told me that his walls were covered in my pictures. Pictures of me in my bedroom, in class, in the cafeteria, in the library, walking around town, you name it. I literally didn't realize how fucking audacious this guy was until he literally broke into my dorm room one night, crept into my bedroom, and put his hand over my mouth to wake me up. This was the moment I realized he was fucking crazy. I told him straight up that we couldn't be friends, but he told me that he just couldn't find anyone else that understood him like I did. I was really fucking glad when my personal reasons for dropping out of college appeared, because it was the only reason why I was actually able to get away from the whacked out weirdo. And I haven't seen him since that night, nor do I ever care to see him again. I wish the story were longer, but again, I couldn't bear to say anything more than this, and this was hard enough for me to tell. The best advice that I can give to you, to anyone, is to not trust people. If you have a gut feeling about someone, trust it, and get the fuck out of Dodge.